Here we go. Sorry about that, folks. I know we're about 4 seconds late, but we were talking about, what were we talking about? Oh, I know what we were talking about. I said there was this is interesting how the stock market works. By the way, not legal advice and JR, and this is not legal advice, opinion, don't rely. This is nonsense, really, BS, as the title said. So please do your own and don't rely upon us. We're just here to hopefully be. Well, what happened?
Before we get started,
yes.
I just want to know the world is not over.
Oh, not yet. Not yet. That might have been a little bit quick clickbaity. It's possible. Some people might construe it that way, but not.
I don't have anything to do with that, with the titles.
Folks. That was actually JR's chief position is he's senior vice president in charge of titles. So
that's the only thing I do for this show.
It does. He's great. So what I was saying that was interesting about at least my reflection on the market, I said about 45 minutes ago, there was a rumor that Israel had retaliated against Iran, that they had, and it was so vague, by the way, some super vague rumor. So you have to start off with that. It's super vague. It said it hit like the nuclear facility in Isfahan. Okay, there is something there, but then about 20 seconds later, Bitcoin took a quick dump because the algorithms saw some language and they just dumped it. And then I was thinking beyond that. So us, retail traders, how the hell are we supposed to compete with that silly algorithm that can beat us to the punch and can overpower us? That's quite a problem.
Yeah, we're not.
That's it. You got to say that's all. That's it.
I'm done.
All right. Fucked. All right. Okay. But anyway, it was just interesting that it did that. Obviously, I'm closely watching the Israel situation, what's going on there. I have to admit, I'm sorry to admit that, obviously, I hope no civilians are injured or killed. It's terrible. War is terrible. There's nothing good about it. But when you watch an ammo dump go up, it is like a video game. Oh. You see, it's amazing what is stored in the same facility. I saw, because I watched a couple of these, and again, I can't. It's like a fire or something. I can't stop watching it. I understand what's going on around, so it's not like I don't understand the significance, but it's like a video game. You see rockets go off. You see these stars. I don't know what they are, but I see these stars go up in the air, all kinds of stuff. It lasts a long time. And the amazing part, and this is the part where I feel sorry for the locals, is they're living next to this, right? We know that like in Lebanon, they had that port. Remember that port exploded because they had a bunch of, I think, ammonium nitrate, that stuff, that fertilizer that makes big bombs that took down the Oklahoma City building. Well, they had it in the port, but in some gargantuan amount, and it went off. It blew up, and it literally looked like a nuclear bomb when it went off. So I think, unfortunately, in Lebanon, there are stores of weapons really like buried right next to civilians. Terrible, really is terrible. So anyway, the greater part was the algorithm, how it picked up on just the rumor. It wasn't fact, just the rumor. And immediately there was an impact on the price. And again, I thought after that process, we compete, we being retail, we compete with that, and we can't. We can't compete. I guess that's why when they talk about black swan events and those kind of things, there's no way, if you're like long and tomorrow the stock market crashes, there's nothing you could do. You're in it. But maybe if you're kind of a little bit ahead of the game, like the algorithms, maybe you could sell out earlier or make transactions actually as this is occurring and make money doing it. And there's no way we have the compute power to do that. At least I don't think. No. Anything else to add about that?
I mean, you almost literally have to stare at the stock market all day. That's the only way you beat it. But you don't really beat it. You're just timing it.
Yeah, you can pick.
You're going to take a loss. It's just how big of a percent is it going to be?
I think you can pick really big companies that do well. Like if you picked Apple 20 years ago, you probably did really well. But for a lot of companies, it's much more problematic, much more difficult. And And the reason why is just because of those factors, that there's others that have an advantage, a strategic advantage, computer advantage. Obviously, we know, I have to say this because I asked you when we started, from the MMTLP situation that there's market makers and others who have access that we as retail we would never have access to, but two, we wouldn't know about what was going on at
That's
all.
right. You wouldn't know what to do with the data even if you had access to it.
Yeah. By the way, I saw today that the two leading SEC enforcement people, the guy with the G name, and somebody else, Gubrel or whatever his name is.
Yeah. Well, he left last week.
Yeah, head of enforcement. They split. They went to a private firms. How do you like that? So they went from like the SEC, a government place where they were making like $7 an hour, to some Big 10 law firm where they're probably making, what do you think, 20 million?
Oh, easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the gargantuan money.
Till you factor in the total compensation.
Yeah, because if you're, right, because that guy goes out and anytime there's a securities something, he's the guy, right? Because he's going to sell. I know everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know everybody. So you want to get something done, you come to me. That's the sale. And that's his value to the company. But obviously, we talk about this constantly, the lack of separation between the two. And the fact is, that's what makes the market so imperfect beyond everything else. And we haven't even talked about the jokes yet. This is like behind the jokes. But anyway,
I thought you gave up on that.
No, haven't given up. It just kind of we went elsewhere. But it's kind of what we talked about: the regulators being seduced away, and this is just an example of that. So, what would now we're just quickly switching. What would bears be without bees?
Years.
Hey, there you go. Nice job. I'm very impressed. What's red and bad for your teeth?
I don't know.
A brick.
Oh my God.
What is Forrest Gump's sign in? What's his password?
I don't know.
One Forrest one.
Oh, good grief.
All right, we have a 26-minute joke, but we're already in like 8 minutes, so I don't know.
I thought the whole show was a joke.
Well, yeah, it is. It is. So I heard you say that some people wanted to talk about GTII. Is that what happened?
I saw a couple comments on there.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a second, but I wanted you to kind of like briefly, because I know you have other interests besides what we talk about necessarily. So you have or have been involved in or have some interest in GME. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I've just been following it again. I started following it probably at the beginning of the year and didn't buy into it. I've just been, hanging out in the community, listening. I'm kind of interested. What I've really been paying attention to is Bed Bath and Beyond and the whole bankruptcy process.
Is that because you need some towels?
Well, I loved Bed Bath and Beyond the store.
You do?
Yeah.
They're kind of empty, aren't they?
Well, yeah, they are right now. That's what I can't. There's some good tinfoil going on out there, and I haven't quite understood exactly what's going on. They're in Chapter 11 bankruptcy reorganization, but if you read some of the documents, it's almost like they're getting rid of a lot of the assets, and that strikes me as odd for a Chapter 11 reorganization, because when you're in a Chapter 11, you're not liquidating, you're reorganizing. That's why it's called reorganization.
But maybe in the reorganization, they are liquidating some debts at a discount or something like that, and maybe that's why they're selling assets.
Lots going on, and it seems like it's a very lengthy process for Chapter 11 reorganization.
Yeah, it could last a long time.
Yeah, so I'm following that. There's a couple of good YouTube videos. Anybody that is invested in Bed Bath and Beyond, if you haven't checked out the PP show, check it out. It's
how do you say that?
PP show.
Okay.
good group of guys, basically the same, same, they talk about Bed Bath & Beyond, GameStop, very similar to what we do with GTII and MMTLP. Only their show's a lot better than ours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
No, it's a good group of guys.
What happened to you?
I'm watching the show for about a month and a half.
See, listen,
But yeah, check it out.
right after you talked nasty, your sound went out, and it wasn't me. So just kind of want to let you know,
It's all a conspiracy.
there's a bigger force that likes our show, just so you know, bigger than BB. I don't even know BB.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I've been following kind of that story here for the last 6 or 7 months, and it's interesting. They've got some good tinfoil on what's happening inside of bankruptcy. Whether or not it's true or not, I don't know, but it's certainly fun to listen to and fun to think about for those guys that are still, there or those folks that bought Bed Bath & Beyond up until its cancellation.
Yeah, this is how I look at it. So I find I'm not a conspiracy person. I'm not. Not that it can't exist, but I'm not. So I find, and this is kind of how it goes. In every case that I'm in, the other side is like dreaming up. One side is dreaming up stuff. So one side is in conspiracy mode. It might be both sides, to be honest, because they're probably distorting the picture both sides. In the general world, I hear, a lot of theories, and I hear very little facts. It's like I'll give you an example. So there was a earthquake in Iran last night, 4.1. And the rumor that was generated is that was a nuclear test. So not that if you looked at the physics, it probably doesn't fit like a nuclear test, but you throw it out there and you don't need facts, and then there she blows. There it'll circulate, and it has a life of its own at that point.
I think as far as that goes, about 40% of Twitter is that people throwing shit out there and seeing what sticks. At least outside of the our community.
If I threw you, would you stick? I don't know.
No. Slide right off that wall.
All right.
So yeah, so that's kind of what I've been paying attention to. I mean, I pop in on spaces every now and again for MMTLP just to hear the latest, and people throw me a mic and ask me some questions. But aside from that, just following you and GTII, and I'm intrigued by the whole Bed Bath & Beyond bankruptcy. Like I'm hardly waiting for it to emerge to see what happens. There's a lot.
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, when this is, I'm kind of like riding GTII out, but when GTII is done, I'm looking for my next target, as we say. BBY, I've heard people talk about it. Just it sounds like it's way too detailed for me to jump in at this time. Looks like, wow, I missed the bus a long time ago. I'm not talking about just the stock, but I'm talking about like understanding what's going on, because it sounds like, I know there's lawsuits that arose out of it too, so I know it's complicated.
So let me just give you an example. So when these companies go into bankruptcy, they have to hire a bankruptcy administrator to manage all the documents. The estate does, to manage kind of all the creditors, the debtor, kind of everything, everything that you could possibly imagine.
A document repository.
So the administrator that Bed Bath & Beyond is using is a company called Kroll. So there are well over 700 documents out there. I mean, it's incredible, and it's everything, every motion, like motion to show, Richard Hoffman entering an appearance for Brian Garman, pro Hadcock Vice. I mean, everything is out there. It's impossible at this point, coming late into the game, to try and read through all this and kind of figure out where things are at with it, because it's overwhelming.
I have a question. Should I correct Vice to Vice, or should I not?
Vice, I can.
Should I not correct it, or should I correct it?
I don't care. Correct me or not, I don't care. Look, this is how I talked in law school. This fucking
if I
couldn't pronounce it, I just said it the way it was. People laughed at me. I didn't.
I'm not going to correct it then. I'm not going to correct it. I decided not to correct that
Whatever, you know what I mean.
twice as opposed to VJs, but I won't correct it. Go ahead. Continue on. So,
Oh,
so
so there's just a tremendous amount of information out there to sift through. So I was sifting through it over the weekend, just reading various documents and that kind of stuff. Uh, but but yeah, I'm watching it from the sidelines. I'm not invested in Bed Bath and Beyond. I have no stake in Bed Bath and Beyond. I'm just curious to see how it plays out.
boy, M. Casey is a very low threshold.
Why? What happened?
He said, "Holy moly, finally a few good jokes." That's a very low threshold. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Nah, you've had better ones than tonight. There's been
You
a
know,
couple that
my sister and my daughter are tremendous audiences.
maybe.
Really, really, they're great. Okay, I find it interesting though. The GME part, I find interesting. The bed BBYO. I'm sure there's going to be others. I don't know if we're going to have like a similar GTII position, but it's very possible. Especially if listen, if I was a company or you knew somebody in Nevada, it might be game at some point in time. Obviously, we talked about MMAT. I think MMAT, if it was jumped on earlier, it could have been. It could have been at least, I don't know what the outcome would have been, but you probably could have stopped my favorite word, the shenanigans from going on. If you would have gotten to court, had somebody at least monitoring what was going on, or else replacing whoever was running the show, didn't seem to have quite the best interest of the shareholders at heart. But anyway, so I'm going to quickly, I have a bunch of stuff to talk about, but of course I know a lot of people are interested in GTII, so I'll give them a quick update if it's possible. So I'm going to separate now. Let's talk about the big picture. The big picture is, I think today, our counsel is filing an opposition to the motion for reconsideration. Part of the problem, since the time is now passed, so I can now talk about it. Part of the problem, and I think it's going to be reflected in the opposition, is they filed the motion for reconsideration as to them. And this is going to sound like technical nonsense, but it actually is significant. They filed the motion for reconsideration as to the minute order. The minute order is not the final order of the court. So that's the reflection of what the court thinks, but then it has to be generated into an order. So I think the minute order, which was the judge's opinion that they were, and this is my opinion, and this is colorful language, he wasn't very fond of them. He put that in the minute order. Eventually it was prepared, and I think I even sent you, it was like a 20-page document. That's what was the final order that was signed by the court. That was dated September 18th. In California, you'd have 10 days to file a motion for reconsideration if you had new facts. In Nevada, it's 14 days. So let's see. So if we go September 18th plus 12 brings us to the 30th, plus 2 is the 2nd. That would be 14. Is today the 2nd? No, oops, we're like 5 days beyond the 2nd. Probably too late. That's what I think the opposition will state in part, although I haven't seen it, but I think that will be one thing. Besides that, I think there's no new facts. There's nothing. They're just, I think at this point in time, they're, in the legal parlance, I would say, to me, it looks like they're just dicking around, trying to buy time. Now, the interesting lineup, this is talking about that. So there's motions to withdraw that are pending also. So the attorneys who were representing the 4 officers and directors in Nevada, and Reichman and Rabari and GTII in California are withdrawing from both my case in California and the case in Nevada. I don't know who's going to be replacing everybody other than Reichman. Reichman has new counsel. And I think there was an issue that arose. I don't know if this is, I can't say I know this 100%. I'd say 99.9%. So I'm not going to guarantee this is 100% accurate. But I think what happened is, and I don't know what he was thinking, but I think Reichman was trying to hire counsel elsewhere and might have used or tried to use or thought about using or considered using GTII funds. So it's possible that he might have delivered a nice chunk of change to some lawyer in New York to do some service. And perhaps that was discovered and the lawyer had to return those funds.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think it would. I don't think, again, I don't know firsthand. I don't know if the accuracy, whatever, but I don't think we're talking about like $10,000 or $20,000. I think we're talking about in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And my understanding is, I believe that the money was requested back, and I think it was returned. I think so. That's somebody in New York. I don't know what capacity they're acting in. I don't know if they're acting in a capacity. I don't know how they were paid. That's a question I have. I don't know how they were paid, especially with the fact that it appears that money may have been returned, which suggests that was GTI money. And it was good for that attorney, whoever it was, to return the money, because if he didn't, and it was GTI money, and that court order said, that Nevada court order said basically don't do it, he could be in contempt and all kinds of bad stuff that can happen.
All kinds of fun goodness.
Yeah, not good stuff. But it's
Now-
interesting. But it is interesting, if true, if that money did go from GTII to New York, and when that happened in relation to the order. It would really be interesting, because and I don't know, by the way, I don't know. Maybe it was like perfectly legit. Maybe it was, I put perfectly legit in quotation marks, but let's say the timing was okay. So there wasn't a court order. There wasn't, let's say, the minute order. The minute order hadn't come down in August. Let's say that hadn't happened yet. And they were just trying to be careful. Whether they should have done it or not is a different story, but that would be different than if there was already a court order and they just kind of ignored it. And I don't know which one it is. I don't know, how it relates to. But it was interesting to me that it happened. And the other part was this new attorney, who I think is representing Reichman, but I don't know if he's representing the other parties. And if he did, does that are we back to square one when we talked about the conflicts of interest that now exist between all these guys and GTII? But I think he might have been in a similar position, whereby his compensation may have been, maybe there wasn't certainty in the source of the compensation. And what my understanding is, my belief is, whatever that issue was, that was resolved also. So that particular counsel, I think, resolved his position also. But again, just interesting to me that occurred, because again, depending on timing, that's really one. It's questionable in the first place, but let's say it's arguably okay. Okay. The timing then becomes a big issue. And your course is going to be, if you ever got to a deposition, you'd be like hammered about that for quite some time. So that's kind of one thing that's going on. And so there's motions. There's motion withdraw. So the current attorneys are leaving. The one attorney's coming in for Reichman in Nevada. As of now, nobody's contacted me. So nobody's coming in for the individuals in my case, which would be Rabari and Reichman. GTII, I do not believe will be pursuing, don't know for certain, but they will not be pursuing that action in California. And I think the instruction has been to shut it down for obvious reasons. Just because my point is, whatever the accusations are against me, the court order in Nevada kind of validates whatever I thought, whatever I'm accused of. And I wasn't even specific enough to do that. And to understand the point, and some of this, again, is really picky stuff. But if you get an action for defamation, it's to prove up the claim. You also have to prove that the person who made the statement, depending upon who the statement was made against, was either negligent or intentionally basically ignored the truth and made an intentionally false statement. And that depends on whether the person is a public figure or not. There was some famous case, I think you probably even remember this case, New York Times versus Sullivan. It's like in a famous case about whether if you're a public figure, there was a higher standard to prove because, public figures get talked about all the time. So, is somebody calling out somebody have the same impact on a public figure that it would be on a private figure? Probably not. So there's a different standard. So besides proving that what you said was false and not opinion and injurious to their reputation, it has to be that. They have to prove that you were at least negligent if they're not a public figure and that you acted intentionally knowing it was false if it was a public figure. Ribari, I believe, is a public figure. I don't think there's any doubt. He's a television, I don't even know this, but he's a television or did TV financial stuff on CNBC and that kind of stuff. And I would believe, and I would argue, not really subject to argument at this point in time, but I would argue that Reichman also is a public figure, that he takes a very public position, lives at a five-star hotel, drives a Bentley, has foundations and the like. I'd feel more comfortable and strong in the argument about Ribari than Reichman. But I think there's an argument to be made with both. But either way, they still have to prove I'm negligent. So not just that I was wrong, but that I was negligent. So I just don't understand. This is my question. If the court in Nevada found worse than whatever I was accused of saying, then how could I have been negligent? Even if I was wrong, how could I have been negligent? I don't get that position. But anyway, I don't get a lot of things. It's not the first thing I didn't understand. So that's that. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I don't think your behavior was anywhere near the negligence threshold.
No. I mean, no. I mean, I think, again, I don't want to have to do this. That's the point. Do I want to go through and prove up what I did, that, I heard from a bunch of people, then I spoke to representatives, and then I gave them a bunch of chances, and then they literally lied about what was going to be occurring in certain documents. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Clearly, I could have been wrong. I'm not saying I couldn't have been wrong, but to form a conclusion based upon that, I think was reasonable. And by the way, it ended up being right. Not just reasonable, because the judge in Nevada, he thought far worse than I did. I mean, if the judge had not legal advice, the language in those videos would have been a lot stronger, not the stuff I did. Because again, that order was really like, you can't do that stuff. So the proceedings are ongoing. They also have a stay motion. So they filed a motion for reconsideration. What are they trying to reconsider? They're trying to reconsider, even though it's not the correct document, they're trying to reconsider. So they filed it as the wrong document. So the judge could easily, I don't know what the judge is going to do. The judge, if I was the judge, it just depends on my day. If I was the judge and somebody filed a motion on the wrong document, I would post a tentative ruling, or I would just strike the document. I'd say it's improper motion, it's off calendar. Mm-hmm. Or I would rule that's the improper motion, off calendar. Because obviously, you could file an improper motion, but until the time ran, they could have filed a new motion. They just elected not to. And I don't think they grasped the difference, I guess. I don't know why they did what they did, but because I'm going to bring you up to speed today. I'm going to allude to it. I don't understand a lot of why they've done what they've done, to be honest, to this point in time. But there's a motion for reconsideration. I think it's BS. I think they'll lose. I feel pretty comfortable. They have a stay motion. So stay motion is to stop the receiver from moving forward. The problem is the receiver started September 18th. So that's like 3 weeks ago. So the stay is a little late, gentlemen.
And didn't we talk about all that? We talked about all that when that we would expect them to file a stay immediately. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's almost
Oh
like they
yeah.
were
I mean, there's
completely
no doubt
they
about
were
it.
they were completely unprepared.
Yeah, I would have done it when the minute order came out, and I would have said, pending, the final order, whenever the final order is issued, we are seeking a stay,
Right.
or the next day after the order is issued, they go in to file a motion to seek a stay.
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind. What do we know? It doesn't make a lot of sense to do it like 45 days after the receiver started. Because if I'm the judge, I am not the judge. But if I'm the judge and they come to me and they say, Your Honor, can we have a stay? And I say, well, why are you coming to me 45 days after the receiver is already in there? What information do you have to tell me that it's a problem, that there's an issue with the receiver over that other than you just don't like it? I don't, and honestly, they probably don't. I think their problem is that they would like Mr. Rabari to be the receiver, obviously,
Well,
and
sure.
they would retain control. So their motion for reconsideration is uh, I think we talked about it, but I'll repeat it because I know it's confusing, because it is confusing. Motion for reconsideration, which is supposed to have new facts, but it doesn't here, but it's supposed to have new facts, is one, that there wasn't that 10% threshold, and they go through an argument, and I know that I haven't seen the opposition, but I know the opposition will be to the point. But even if it wasn't, there were three other bases for the court imposing the receiver. So I never really understand the motion for reconsideration. It would be like, I was trying to make an analogy. So you go and you go to a bank and you steal cash, coins, and a bunch of cashier's check and a chocolate bar. And in your defense, you claim, I didn't steal the chocolate bar. That's kind of the
Hey,
argument.
I left
It makes no
25
sense.
cents on the counter.
Yeah, I know, but it makes no sense to me why they did it like that. The second part is more to the point. They're asking Rabari to be considered, and I guess their argument is he's been an angel since he's been involved, and
2 months.
yeah. Well, remember that he was supposed to start May 1st, but then they backdated the start date to April 1st, and after April we have a lot of events. I don't know if he's responsible for any of this stuff, but a lot of stuff happened after April 1, that 10K filing where it showed that ridiculous performance. The auditor got canned. They got delisted. I mean, this is just like a few things.
Stellar performance to date.
Yeah, delisted. They didn't disclose what the deficiencies in operation were.
Lost the company.
Yeah, I mean, it's not trading. I mean, that's not a great performance, in my opinion. Now, maybe other people think that's okay. I don't think that's great. And in the order, what's interesting to me, in the order from the court, even though Rabari is not a party to the proceedings in Nevada, because when they filed it, he wasn't, or at least we didn't know that he was an officer and director. When the court defines management, he includes Rabari in management. So I think he intentionally, and this is my guessing of what some judge is thinking, so this is pure speculation, but to me, it was like saying to Rabari, you're not off the hook here. You're not off the hook either, even if you're not a defendant. Right. And that obviously could change at some point in time. Now, again, I'm not saying he's responsible for it, but if you were going to say, my performance has been stellar, I could make an argument that perhaps it's not. And it may not be your fault, but I could certainly make an argument to say that, wow, things really haven't gone well, especially considering I looked at the volume of trading today. I think I saw it. I think the volume of trading today was 6,700 shares, which was, not a bad day. And that's everybody but us, right? Everybody but retail who's trading. And the numbers are, because I think the average trading now is like 60,000 a day. It's going down. So if the daily average or 3-month average continues to decline because it's not trading. But the fact it's not doing that suggests maybe that performance wasn't terrific. Arguably not terrific. You're going to say something?
No, yeah, it's 6,700
Yeah.
shares.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it every day to see, because I don't want to see, what I'm looking for is someday when I see like 20 million shares. Because, not that, because I don't, again, I repeat this, I don't believe in that short squeeze part. I'm a disbeliever that you can predict when and where, whatever. But if one day I see 20 million shares being sold, that's going to suggest to me that somebody's trying to cover, and so as long as it's like 4,000, these numbers, it sucks because none of us can trade it and nobody can get out. Really, we're stuck. We're like, it's basically like an MMTLP situation. Until it's corrected, we are stuck unless you're accredited, and you want to get out at, I guess it was today, we had a good day. I think it went up to 4 cents today. But
Sure.
otherwise, 5.
5.
Okay. It's 5, but I don't even know that. When it says 5, because somebody told me that the market maker can do a transaction at 1. So even though it's priced at 5, it's not a real 5 because it's not trading. It's not trading like a normal security. It's more like, these are like almost like handshake deals. 6,700 shares at, just think about the amount of money that exchanged hands today. What's 6,700 times 5 cents? Divide by 20. That's like $300, right? Like $315 or something. Let's see how good not legal advice is with math.
Hold on, 6,700.
I think it's in the 300s.
$335.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a lot of liquidity flowing into GTII.
Money.
Yeah. So if there's $300, I don't think there's a big movement. I know people ask about that, by the way. I see it on X. They ask, when is it going to be tradable or whatever. I can't give you a date. I know the receivers, that's one of their main goals from the start. But I also know that until it's done, there's nothing that can be done. I mean, in my view, until it's back, it's been corrected and it's tradable. I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. I don't know if there can be that can be done.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything you can do.
And that's why, literally, that's the first thing that the receiver is interested in doing, is taking corrective action. They obviously wanted to finish the audit. I don't think the audit was completed, but there was work done by that Fortune company that was hired by somebody. I don't know who it was hired by, but it was hired by somebody. So just to kind of summarize GTI, what's going on, I told you about the motion withdraw. There's a stay motion. So they're trying to, again, after the fact, they filed a motion to stay. I really don't know why they're doing it, honestly. I think they're going to be obviously denied. Anything's possible, but I think they're going to be obviously denied.
Yeah, I would think so too.
And, I'd understand if GTII was paying the freight, because that might encourage people to make arguments that they might not ordinarily make if they're not covering the fees. But if somebody's paying the freight directly now, and I think that's the way it's going to be from this point forward, I think it's going to be a tough row to hoe. Because I don't think anybody's going to want to spend a boatload of money, and I don't think the outcome is great. I don't understand. I don't understand if you were on that side, why you'd have a confident position. Myself, especially in light of the judge in Nevada. Why would you feel confident in light of the fact that judge just reamed you?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me, but maybe it's personal. It's his company. He doesn't want to lose it.
Yeah, I agree. So those two things are going on. Maybe there'll be some other legal maneuvers. Maybe somebody will come in, and now I'm talking Nevada. Maybe there'll be somebody coming and representing the other defendants too. I don't know. I do not know. They may not be represented. They may just kind of work out a deal and disappear or cooperate or whatever. I do not know. I would think that if Reichman, and this is just pure speculation, that if Reichman or whoever was not paying their legal fees, that they would be very pliable in terms of how they would interact with our side. If Reichman or somebody else is paying the legal fees, they're probably not going to be as approachable. That's kind of the way it goes. I don't know how they're going to deal with it. There's going to be an issue that arises, I think, in Nevada, that same conflict of interest issue, because in Nevada, they were representing, and there's an issue about whether in a derivative action. So a derivative action, we talk about class actions, shareholder actions. A class action, you could bring it on behalf of individual shareholders, and then they get their coupon of 25 cents off at Carl's Jr. That's the reward. Or there could be an action and the benefits go to the company. And that's a derivative action. And that's what this is. So theoretically, since it goes for the benefit of the company, the officers and directors are being sued are on the opposite side. And the same counsel shouldn't be representing both sides and can't get a waiver, really. There's no really way of getting a real waiver to waive the conflict. And that's before we have the conflict that goes on in California. So let's go back now to, so we've talked about Nevada. So we're just waiting for a couple of legal events to happen. In the meantime, I know the receiver is moving forward and doing whatever his thing is. And I know he's going to, I don't know when, but I know soon that he will be doing some kind of report. And I know his attorney will be doing a report to the court. I don't know exactly when, but I think, short term, couple of weeks, something like that. There'll be a report, and the report will kind of summarize. I haven't seen it, so I don't know what's going to say. But basically, it's going to describe where we're at, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, et cetera. And it'll kind of reset everything. But everybody, unfortunately, I hate saying this, but it's the truth. Everybody's got to be patient, unfortunately, because it's not going to happen overnight. And again, when I tell you that the stock is tradable again, that's when all the questions about how it's going to do and et cetera, that's when they're more relevant. But until I tell you that the stock's tradable and everything's been corrected, then I'm just kind of giving you, I'm trying to be transparent, obviously. I'm trying to let you know what's going on. I'm trying to clarify so you kind of understand the nonsensical legal procedures that are ongoing. But I'm not telling you that we're like a minute away from the end. But I am saying that we're certainly in a positive direction. And it's not like at this point in time, and I think I've seen comments like that, the receiver doesn't ignore interaction, nor does his counsel. They're not hiding from anything. So if you were going to construe the reaction of the other side, and based on the reaction, you were going to attribute their mindset. When somebody doesn't call you back, you become suspicious. And when somebody engages with you, you become less suspicious. You have more trust in somebody who's forthright, and you have less trust in someone who's not responsive. And my dealings, my personal dealings, I was trying to think about this. I don't think I was ever contacted by GTII management. I don't think, not once. I had some agents and representatives, but not once, which to me told me a lot. That was like one thing that was significant, that they wouldn't even come out and talk, even if just tell me we can't talk. They could have done that. We could say, listen, we understand your questions. We're not trying to be evasive, but because of SEC rules or something. They could have made up some story, but at least kind of interact. When you don't interact, it makes people suspicious. And then when you file the 10K that they filed, it makes you think that the lack of interaction is intentional, because it's going to be difficult to explain that. So that's where GTII is, and obviously I will let you know about how the receiver, and when the report comes out, I'm sure people will have the report before I do, to be honest. They'll probably be digging on it, and they'll probably be posting questions on Twitter about what this means and whatever, and we'll do obviously a live. We'll go through the report, we'll discuss it. So that's the Nevada part. At the same time, I'm still stuck in the California part. Part of it is because it's a tricky little timing because of the motion to withdraw. Part of it is because of the procedures that are required. So so we had a deal. The deal was I was going to let them not respond, let them get out, and give whoever might come in 4 days after the motion withdrawal was heard to file a opposition. And we would kick the date of the hearing out 3 weeks. So a stipulation, and so the hearing date would change. The current hearing date in my case, and these are just procedural motions. So I'm hoping I'm successful and the case is over, but I don't know. But they're heard on the 24th of October. So we were going to move the dates out to the 21st, but it's still up to the judge. So we prepared a stipulation. The other side prepared a stipulation, submitted to the judge, and the judge rejected it, denied the request.
Really?
Now we had the request to continue the hearing. Now we had, and was their request. Now I don't know what the judge, I don't know if it's just because the judge, perhaps, maybe that's the way the judge commands his court. It's possible. Or maybe the judge has some familiarity with the case. I don't know which one. Because it may be the matter where, because obviously this case is not going to be the biggest case on his docket, is my guess. And it may
Probably not.
Probably
might be the most annoying.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think it's annoying. I think it's likely he doesn't even see it until like a day before the hearing or, shortly before that, unless his law clerk has gone through it. Maybe that's how it's going on. But I presume no great decision. I just presume that he has got command over his court and he doesn't want to move forward. So we had in the deal that said, okay, if for some reason he says no, then 4 days. But then, so he said no. So I then got contacted by the opposing counsel who asked me about that extension. I said, okay, I'm not going to dispute that I said the extension, but what I believe is because you've disclosed a conflict of interest already, because you're getting out of the case. You're filing motions withdraw, and part of it is because there's conflicts of interest. And you've been instructed not to file anything on behalf of GTII. That's why it's kind of funny that they filed something on behalf of GTII. So I said, what I think you should do is not file anything other in your motion withdraw other than an ex parte application to the court to get clarification based upon what the circumstances are. You've been instructed not to do anything further. You're withdrawing. There's a hearing. What do we do? They ignored me. They filed their opposition that day. So that was Friday. So technically, they were late, but we had a deal. So and I have to prepare replies to these documents. So I've prepared one of them already. And in it, I referenced exactly what I just said. I said, there's a conflict. And I described the conflict, but I also have to say that I agreed to the 4-day extension, but I also said you should consult with the court. So they filed their opposition. In their opposition, they filed one of the motions they're opposing. They're required to submit admissible evidence. They didn't submit anything with their filing. So their late filing was deficient. So over the weekend, I started preparing an opposition to that. Part of my opposition was that it says they have to do something, they didn't do it. Today, they late filed 2 declarations that are basically, boilerplate declarations. I can't get into the defects in these declarations, but I think a judge could be concerned about the content of it. And I think I don't think it's confusing. I think it's objective issues. So 1, that they're late. 2, I never agreed like they could have multiple filing dates. You can file late because I'm stuck by the real date. So if they file something late, it impacts me too. It's not like it's just completely doesn't have effect. It's also, not wet signed. And also, just kind of interesting enough, in their motions to withdraw, they say that their that their communications with their client has broken down. So if your communication with your client is broken down, how do you get a declaration from them? I just don't get it. So I think there's a lot of issues with that declaration, and I'm going to certainly challenge that evidence. It's procedure, so I may not win, even though I think I obviously should win at this stage. It's not guaranteed I would. I hope I do. I think in the end I will, of course. course, and it may be that these cases kind of die a death on their own anyway.
I think
But
that's
it's good. But anyway, I'm sorry.
I said I think that's what's going to happen. They're just going to die.
Yeah, but it's just kind of interesting. All the stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Just just like the oppositions, for example, were filed on behalf of all three plaintiffs. In other words, Mr. Reichman, Mr.
Right.
Rabari, and GTII. At the same time, when GTII instruct them not to file anything.
Yeah.
And again, I think there's a huge conflict of interest, and I think a huge conflict of interest, in my opinion, goes just beyond with counsel, but with the management who would accept that conflict as being acceptable to shareholders. I don't get it, to me. But again, I don't know. Maybe there was discussions. I have no idea. Maybe there's something that makes some magic to it. But anyway, I'll be filing something this Thursday. They'll be hearing on the 24th. I don't know if somebody will be coming in to represent the two other individuals. I expect GTII hopefully will die a death, not the company, but the party in this.
Clarify that.
Yeah.
Clarify.
Yeah, not GTII, the company, but as a party in the action against me. I hope that will soon be resolved. And I think for the individual plaintiffs, again, I don't understand it, never understood it, because theoretically exposed themselves to, with a bad case, opens themselves up to claims, and it makes no sense. Why do that? I don't understand that. I don't know who's making those decisions. I don't know who's getting paid. I don't know why those decisions are being made, but it's curious to me. So that is GTII up to the moment through Nevada, California, and one other thing. So part of what has to be done also is to search for property and assets. And I believe that's ongoing. And I believe there are targets. So beyond the ones that we know about, we talk about people that theoretically might have potential exposure. But I think there's others that might have control over assets that might be problematic. And it's not about anything that you and I have talked about, by the way. We talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we've never really talked about their assets.
We did, because we went, at one point in time, we talked about the Bentley, right? We talked about the Bentley and Bentley. That's an asset.
Aren't those Reichman's assets?
Yeah, the Bentley and the Misc, the Bentley and the mechanic. Don't you remember that story? The mechanic. And we talked about a piece of real property, I think, at one point in time. That's probably, we talked about all the shares. Those are assets. Depending on the value of the share, it could be, $100 million, could be more. I don't know. At some point in time, it was, because in January 25th, 2023, that was like $100 million in shares that was distributed at that point in time. Some of which was inadvertently and erroneously distributed, unfortunately, as we know. So that kind of brings us up to speed about GTII. I have a bunch of other things, and I'll briefly go through it. You want to say anything about the Administrative Procedure Act today?
No, not today.
All right. Alpine, I checked. I said last time that the FINRA had filed like a letter brief.
Yeah,
it was like 6 months after the oral argument. And then last week, Alpine filed a responsive letter brief to like one stupid case that really makes no difference either way. And again, we're 6 months or more out from when they heard this case. That's part of the problem. There's no reason. This wasn't that complicated. I don't know what they're waiting for. Are they waiting? I mean, is there a case that they believe?
I don't know.
Is there a case they believe is going to the Supreme Court that they want to wait for, and they're not going to, because we're almost at the next term, right? October, we're starting again.
Yeah, we start. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the first.
Does somebody think there is a case that's going to be decided that they want to wait on? Because I
It's
haven't heard.
today. The term starts today. It's
Oh,
the first
okay.
Monday in October.
All right. So that's a very relevant question. So
Yeah.
maybe they're waiting because otherwise, 6 months, because again, March till October, I didn't think it was like a super complicated case. I didn't. I mean, I would think they would have it briefed. The parties had a
well,
brief way early, but the court probably had a brief too. So to get that from that point to a decision seems like a long amount of time. And I don't know who might have influence there because I don't know. I don't know if the SEC has influence over the courts and they could encourage the courts to delay it. I hope not, but I don't know. But it makes no sense that it hasn't happened and they haven't been, as far as I know, that action where in Utah where they were getting kicked out because they couldn't qualify financially, DTCC. Do you remember that part also? That kind of like disappeared. Not that it's not still pending, but it's disappeared. Nobody's taking action.
I mean, the whole case has been dragging on way longer than I would have thought it would.
For like 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, we
I mean,
initially
I guess the question is, what is a good reason for that? Is it just sheer incompetence, not interested, or is there some reason? Is there an actual reason? Does someone have influence over that decision making to cause it not to be, not the expulsion to have occurred by now?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
I don't know. I saw today the purported replacement. Do you see this for Gensler?
Yeah.
If Trump wins, it was the
head
of legal from
Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of that's all rumor and speculation. You know what I mean? I don't believe that.
It's not true. Are you saying it's not true?
I take everything I see like that with a grain of salt. I just do.
All right. Okay. I understand. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Today's the anniversary of 10/7, October 7th, which was, if you're Jewish, wasn't one of the best days. And if your parents were Holocaust survivors, it's really not a great day.
Isn't this the beginning of Yom Kippur?
We're kind of between Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year, which started a few days ago, and Yom Kippur, which I think starts on the 11th. Okay. So it's kind of like an extended holiday. I think in Israel it's a holiday. The whole thing is a holiday. In the U.S., it's not. It's like the day and then the day. But on October 7th was the attack in Israel, and especially, I was thinking about especially those kids who were at the music festival. I was thinking like because I play poker with a bunch of Grateful Dead fans, and basically that's kind of how it looked like. I can only imagine like a bunch of people going to a Grateful Dead concert, and that's the conclusion, or they got kidnapped and are hostages. So, to me, it's a very significant date, and for anybody who was impacted by that and thereafter, wherever, I feel for everybody. So, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. A story that's coming out. It's a kind of a legal story. Besides the mayor of New York, I guess, is getting indicted and might get kicked out. And I guess like not just the mayor, but a bunch of his people that work for the mayor. That probably can't be good. And whoever the person was, I assume it's usually some kind of financial influence. I think with the mayor, it was flights to Turkey or something. It was like a Turkish airline doing some kind of like giving first class tickets for coach or something like that.
And they were contributing to a PAC that he belonged to that he needed to report, or so there were campaign contributions involved as well too.
Yeah, isn't there another way to do it where somebody gives you a gift? You got to pay tax on it is the problem. But
you got to report it too.
Yeah,
he wasn't reporting any of this stuff.
Yeah, and you're probably the case. With all these public officials, if they get caught on one thing, it probably is not the only thing. It's maybe the thing that was the strongest or the easiest to prove. But I don't think these guys, and again, I don't know, but I don't think these guys are, trying to get caught. So I think they'd probably try to be discreet, and whatever we know is just probably a fraction of whatever
Oh, it
exists.
always is. It
Yeah.
always is.
In Mexico, I thought this was an interesting story that they have a new president of Mexico who also happens to be Jewish, by the way. The first, and actually it's female, so it's the first Jewish female president of Mexico, and her first target is fentanyl smuggling. So listen, I think that is a huge problem. That would, if I had especially young kids, that would scare the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
That they went to a party and things happen and somebody spiked something with something. That is like, to me, that is one of the most scary things. And I know a lot of it comes from China. I know it's imported through China. But Mexico too, and everywhere. And again, that's something. If they can alleviate that concern, then that would be great. I didn't see this. I thought it was kind of funny. The headline. Did you know that Boar's Head, the meat?
Yeah.
That family's been feuding for 50 years. So
Really?
there's been an ongoing feud between the boars' heads, and I thought that was an interesting thing. I saw that the big law firms, they're charging, what they're charging per hour now? I mean, commonplace.
Probably about
You roboted. One more time.
about $800-900.
2,500. Yes, that's a wow. Did you know that Stellantis, which is part of Jeep, that company that used to be around, they're very close to going to bankruptcy.
Oh, really?
And did you know that country star Garth Brooks got accused of sexual assault?
Yeah, I did see that.
And that takes me to the Menendez brothers. That does take me. I skipped the 26-minute joke, luckily, but I might as well say it anyway. And you got to listen very carefully, right? What has 4 wheels and flies?
I don't know.
A garbage truck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said it. I said you had to listen very carefully. All right. So the Menendez, I think I mentioned it, and then since then it's become a big deal because I guess that they had a TV show. Because of the TV show, and it's happened before, the TV show has generated interest because everybody acknowledges, I guess, at this point in time, they were sexually abused by their parents. I think it's accepted as a question, that it occurred. The question is, if that occurred, and if you had an opportunity to go to the cops, for example, if you bring home like a shotgun and you murder your parents, is that an acceptable outcome, or should you have gone to the cops? And I think there was a trial. There was a hung jury. The second trial, I think the evidence on sexual, whatever the molestation defense was more limited by the judge. Part of that, I think, was because one of the brothers, I don't remember which one, but I think one of the brothers basically is like the lead brother, and the other brother is like the following brother. I don't remember. I think it's Lyle is the lead and Eric is the follower, and one might be older than the other. One of them, whoever it is, testified in the first trial and apparently was super convincing. But for the fact the jury hated their lawyer, they got a hung jury. And the jury did actually say they hated their lawyer, and that's kind of why probably why they hung. After that trial, that same guy, Lyle or whatever, wrote a book about kind of like that OJ book. If I had killed her, this is how I would have done it, basically. And basically it set it forth and kind of negated a little bit about some of the defenses. And, and it created doubt, so much to the extent that the defense couldn't call him as a witness because they didn't want him to be cross-examined about the book. Now, the book was put on also as evidence because they could talk. I think they, you could call a publisher or somebody else and you could get the book into evidence, but they couldn't impeach Eric or Lyle, whatever. And the other brother testified, and the other brother wasn't great, is my recollection. And they lost.
Right.
And they got life without parole. I think they've been in jail about 30 years, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's like 30, when OJ, yeah, part of the story was when they're in jail, because they were in LA County jail. They were in LA County jail, probably as the retrial, because they didn't get out of jail because they didn't have any money. So they had a big bail and they couldn't get out. Even though their parents were really wealthy, the money got frozen and then it got expended. So they had the first trial, they were in jail. It was a long trial. Hung jury. They don't get out. They go back to jail. During that time, the OJ car chase happened. They were like watching it in jail. And as it turned out, OJ was placed in the cell next to Eric Menendez. So that was the connection. So that's 1994. That's 30 years ago. Yeah. So they've been in jail that long. So they probably are like close to 50, probably about now. Because I think they were maybe older, probably mid 50s, because they're probably in their 20s when they were
mid-50s, because they were older than I was.
Yeah. So the issue is now because of and for example, I have a picture. I don't know if you could see it. Probably no. There's no way you can see it. I have a picture of something, and in the picture, there's the Menendez, the two Menendez, Menendi, as we call them, because it's plural. And on one side is Robert Shapiro, who was famous for the OJ trial. And the other side is Gerald Chaliff, who was my evidence professor. So he was like a kind of a technical guy, more of a technical guy. But anyway, it's interesting how this is now, it's interesting how it works. If something is publicized enough, it has a chance of influencing enough people to get a second look. And it's a tough call. If they were like really sexually abused, do you have sympathy for them? And should they be treated differently than someone who's not? Should their sentence be different? I think probably part of their problem, and probably where they probably didn't get, well, one is they probably weren't very sympathetic, but two, because they were rich kids in Beverly Hills, nobody really cared, and nobody really felt any sympathy for them. And because they were seen to be duplicitous in that book, I think that hurt them. But anyway, it's interesting to see how now there's a push to have another look at it. Mm-hmm. And I think not to change the conviction, but maybe to change the sentence. Seems like that's the push now, that maybe they want to change it from a life sentence to maybe some determinate sentence. I don't know. If my kids shot me, I don't know if what my choice would be. I hope they wouldn't. They haven't so far. They have not, and they're older than a Menendi, so I think I'm in good shape. But I don't
think you have anything to worry about.
I think that's a tough call. But I'm sure this will be a huge case if they actually do if they have hearings on this. It's going to be huge. And again, it's interesting. It's going to be 30 years later. And it would be interesting to see if Leslie, because she wasn't involved in the retrial, and she moved. She lived, because when this trial was going on, she was living out here in Southern California. She moved to New York. I think she's originally from New York. It'd be interesting if she participated in that. I don't know if other people are interested in that, but I think it's kind of interesting because I think it's a really tough question. Mm-hmm. I even saw the series, kind of boring at times, but I saw it. And the part about the book, I think that was really damaging. And I don't know if I don't know legally, maybe there can be an argument that, the book or portions, because, what happens on appeal and, is you're looking for errors. You're not like trying to determine new facts, but you're looking at errors. So what you might do is, like, let's say they introduce the book, and maybe there's a certain passage in the book that has you think has really important language that would be beneficial for you. But maybe the other side thinks it would be too prejudicial. So that kind of ruling might be the subject of an appeal. And if they determine that, because it has to come this way too, if they determine that error was, the cause and reversible error, then you could win an appeal. A lot of times, and most times, because you can't do a trial and not make mistakes. So
Sure.
the judge is making rulings, the judge is doing the best they can, and everybody else is trying the best they can, but there'll be mistakes made. So the appellate courts know that and they accept that. So as long as it's not like a significant mistake that would change the outcome or potentially change the outcome, it's a difference between civil and criminal, obviously, also. In the civil case, you need more of a mistake because you're not talking about somebody's, freedom. In a criminal case, less of a mistake, just again, because you're talking about somebody's liberty. So if it's just a mistake that's harmless error, that's what they call it, harmless error. And it just happens, a mistake. And so their position in a Menendez case, they would, and I'm sure that's what the appellate court, they'll go through and they'll look through the evidence and say, here, you made this mistake, this mistake, this mistake, and that was a error. They also might argue, sometimes they might argue that their counsel was ineffective, which is kind of funny because at the time, I think Leslie Abramson was, I think, if not the number one defense attorney in LA, top, one of the top ones. So it'd be interesting if you question her performance or the later. There was a second trial. You could say the second group of lawyers, Robert Shapiro, maybe, who's no longer
Hard
with
time.
us.
You have a hard time doing that too.
Well, he's not around, right? But you could certainly lay it off, right? You could accuse somebody. You could say, you could make up any story, right? You could say, I told him to do this, but he didn't. I told him in private. We had a private conversation, just me and him. And I told him X, Y, and Z. And he said, I know best and whatever. So no, forget it. And, if you would have done what I would have said about like emphasizing this sexual misconduct and all whatever, you could say a lot of stuff, especially
Right.
with him not being there. I'm sure I don't think there's a book. Is there like a biography by Robert Shapiro?
I don't know. But I guess the question I have is what the hell? Why would they have thought it was a good idea to write a book in between trials?
You got to be a nut. And they got.
Exactly.
I think they've been married multiple times, or at least between them,
I
they've been
mean, how,
married
how,
multiple times in prison.
how can you think that's a good idea to write a book in between trial, knowing full well you're going on trial again, to write and release a book?
Well, I guess you make a deal before the end of the first. Oh yeah, I think this is how it works. I think you're really full of yourself. So
Yeah.
when you testify, he was good, by the way. When you testify, you're brilliant and believable, but you kind of buy into your own shtick a little too much. So you're talking to somebody already, and you're basically giving the story as it's happening, and you probably sign an agreement, and you're getting paid money, and you're so full of yourself, you have no contemplation you can lose. So unfortunately, they didn't lose. They got a hung jury, but that was good enough. And it was too late at that point in time. I think mostly it's ego. They just like because he even the way it was portrayed in the series, he was really full of himself in terms of the quality of his own testimony. And when
Mhm.
his brother testified, he ripped him. I mean, he absolutely ripped him to shreds how he testified. So I think it was just ego and got the best of him. And listen, it cost him
So
30
so
years.
their ego got the best of them. So their story they manufactured in the first trial couldn't work in the second trial because their egos got in the way.
Well, I don't even
That's
know
how
if
I
that's
see it.
it. I don't
That's
even
how I
know.
see
I think it's more confusing. I think the question would be if you were the lawyer, even if it was true, even if like the book was like, made up or like embellished, let's say it was. Let's say you're writing a book and you want to sell a lot of books. So you might embellish stories. You might. That's not unreasonable to think about. But if I put you on the stand,
Yeah. Now you
they're
got it back.
gonna they're gonna
Rip you.
yeah. So what you said here is not true, correct? You go through the lies, and then by the time you're done, he's nothing. He's like completely worthless. No, worse than worthless. He's just not. He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
At least if he doesn't testify, because the jury in the second case doesn't know that he testified in the first case and won't have that in front of them, so they won't know what they missed.
Right.
But his attorneys know what he couldn't present. And again, that was just dumb, and his ego got the best of him. It's more, my interest is, again, this was a reflection on the current times, that if you get a cause going because of social media, it can pick up a lot of steam. And yeah, and 30 years ago, whenever they got convicted, that might be the case. If their trial was today, they probably would get off, because they could hire so many people to paint one. They could pollute the jury pool, just by putting out content. But two, especially with what goes, we've heard of cases of sexual abuse 30 years ago. It might happen, but not as regularly announced as it is now. Now, I mean, it's in the papers every day. So if you make that accusation, I think you get a lot more mileage out of it. I think there'd be a much better chance they prevail.
Right.
That, which is also sad. I mean, that shouldn't be the case, right? It shouldn't be the case that in two different time periods, you get different results in cases. It really shouldn't be the case. Facts are no different.
No, you're right. But we've become so numb. Excuse me. Sorry about that. We've become so numb to some of this stuff. It's just everyday. It's everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you see that Elon Musk came and joined Trump at the Pennsylvania rally?
Yeah, he was in Butler. Well, apparently he was in Philadelphia prior to that. So
Right.
Philadelphia to Pittsburgh's a 45
I'll be
minutes.
I'll be interested to see what the impact, if there's an impact. I think I've mentioned this before. I follow Nate Silver, and I follow Real Clear Politics. I think one's kind of more right, one's kind of more left, and it's just more of a consensus. So I think right now, it's interesting to me. Right now, I think when I looked at it today, when they put everything together, and there's a big margin. I'm sure, like a margin of error that's bigger than the difference. But I think the difference was 2.3%. Harris was up nationally 2.3%, which I think is on the higher side of what it's been recently, but still within the margin of error, because usually that's about 3%. But in the key swing states, Trump was up by 0.1%.
Yeah.
So
I just saw a poll. I thought I saw a poll the other day that had him up 51 to 50.
Well, that's 1%. That's 101%. So
But it's still within
I don't think that could be
51 to 49 or whatever. He was showing 51%.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
it's all still within the margin of error, so it really doesn't matter.
yeah, and polls are polls. It really depends on who they question and what they question. I look at it usually just kind of like a sake of, just as a reference point. And it's interesting. I find it interesting. I like numbers, so I find it interesting. And it would be interesting to me if, because it's possible, Harris could win the national poll by 2.3% and Trump win the electoral college. That would be that's a very interesting thing. I also saw that which to me, I would think this is a good sign for Trump. And it's going to sound odd that I say that, but I think I heard today, I think it came from the Republicans, that the race for the Senate, no, it wasn't. I don't remember who put it up, but maybe it was one of these pollsters, that the race from the Senate is getting closer. So whereas they thought the Republicans would be able to retain an advantage, it's becoming a question. It's not sure, because they thought that Tester in wherever he is, Idaho or North Dakota, wherever he is, that he was going to lose, but now it looks like he's not going to lose. And they thought that in West Virginia, Manchin's seat, Joe Manchin, that the Democrats would lose that seat. Now they may not lose that seat. So if they win that seat, then they still have a control. So to me, the way the stock market reacts, stock market wants, generally they want a split. They
Yeah.
don't want one party. They don't really care who the party is. They don't want one party to control, because in effect they want they want some kind of gridlock, so they can kind of anticipate what's going to happen. So the fact that, because I think the House is definitely going to go to the Republicans. I think that's
Oh, I agree.
yeah. So the fact that if the race in the Senate flips in the Democrats' way, that might be kind of like the country kind of organizing itself to have a split. And that might be good for Trump, because that would be Trump winning, but the Democrats would retain one branch, and therefore there would be gridlock, and it would make it more difficult for one party to do too much. So I just found that interesting. We'll have to see how it plays out. The polling is obviously, most people don't believe in the polls. Um, I don't. It's as good as the questions, really, and as good as the sample size and the sample. And I think some polling companies, left and right, definitely have some interest one way or the other.
Well, sure.
And I know that Nate Silver accused Rasmussen of getting paid, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Rasmussen tends to be the most favorable for the Republicans in general.
Well, I think if the administration, Harris and Biden, don't get this fucking mess cleaned up from these hurricanes and have a better face image here, especially with now Milton was a Category 5 hurricane, 2 days away from slamming the coast of Florida. If that thing hits hard and they don't have a good showing with FEMA and whatnot, they're definitely going to lose Florida. They don't stand.
So that hurricane went up to the last report. It was Category 5, was 180-mile-an-hour winds, and the pressure was 905 millibars, which to any human being, that means nothing other than the fact that's really, really historically low. And then they had a plane after that. They had a plane, so that's like an hour ago, maybe an hour and a half ago. They had a plane go in it, and the pressure had dropped beneath 900. It was in the 800s.
It's 650 miles off the coast of Florida, and
Yeah. So what the only savior is speed, kind of, because the shoreline, as you go towards the shoreline, it gets shallower, and the temperature will get cooler. Well, shallower or deeper. I remember which one. One or the other, shallower or deeper. But as you get closer to the coastline, the temperature of the water will get colder. Not cold, but colder. The temperature of the water is the engine for the storm and the energy. And all what happens is there's a transfer of energy. So as the storm goes over an area, it will literally cool off that area. It's literally changing the temperature. And as it cools off, it loses energy. So luckily enough, before it hits the coast of Florida, it will hit some cooler water. So it'll hopefully slow it down and decrease its intensity. The question about that will be how fast it's going at that point, because you kind of want it to go slower over that cold area so it can kind of get zapped, and lose a good amount of its strength. And hopefully it won't hit the exact same area as Helene that just hit.
Well, it's going to depend on the turn it takes once it comes inland.
Yeah, and they approximate. They have a cone. They end up with a cone that's maybe a couple hundred miles wide, and each day as it gets closer, that cone gets narrower and narrower, and the right front, and they divide a storm. You didn't think you're gonna get weather here. They divide these storms into 4 parts: the right side, the front and the rear, and the left side. And the right front quarter, that's always the worst part of the storm. Yeah. So if the storm came in, let's say, to the east of Tampa, so to the left of Tampa, Tampa would get hit by the worst part of the storm. If the storm comes farther to the right of Tampa, then something farther down the coastline would get hit by the storm. And really, it's where it comes in, where the eye comes in, and how long it lasts over land. And while it's going over land, it will get weakened. That's what happens as it goes over land. So besides the cold water and the land will kind of zap it of its strength. But these people in Florida just had like some major disaster, and which must suck. I've never experienced a hurricane, only get earthquakes, unfortunately. But having two back to back, that sucks. It must cause a lot of stress, must really, put strain on your life.
It's a lot. I mean, they just got whacked 2 weeks ago, and now here comes another one.
Plus the insurance, right? Because what happens a lot of times, I don't know if everybody experienced natural disasters, but a lot of times, a natural disaster happens and they cancel insurance. They'll not, and it won't be you. They will cancel everybody. That happened to me. I've been with Farmers Insurance for 30 years in where I live now, and all of a sudden they decided everybody was canceled.
Yeah.
The only way you could not be canceled, because it's an issue of fire. The only way you could not get canceled is if you removed every plant around your house. And it was not really feasible to do that. And they were looking for a way to go out. But that's something that everybody experiences, unfortunately, when a natural disaster happens. Besides the insult of having to deal with the disaster, you got to deal with I almost said a bad word. You have to deal with your effing insurance company who, one, hopefully and I'm not trying to make anybody, apprehensive. Hopefully they all stay in business. Let's start off that way. But even if they're solvent and all good, they're going to try to pay you as little money as possible.
Sure.
And you got to fight that. And it's not pleasant especially after you suffer a natural disaster. It really sucks. So my heart goes out to everybody in Florida who has to suffer through this second event. Hopefully it's the last one of the season for them.
There's John is on. John, where part of Florida are you in? Miami, I think. I think she's in Miami.
Yeah, my best goes out to everybody in Florida. I hope it ends up, I hope the storm ends up kind of petering out, because the way it goes is the storms intensify, but then it's a cycle. As they get stronger, they actually have to get weaker in a way. So the eye wall has to break down, and then it reforms. So it depends where it does that in relation to the coastline. If you happen to be in a cycle where it's a breakdown, that's better for the locals. If it happens to be after they've kind of re-strengthened, it's not. Obviously, if you're in Florida, listen to your local officials. Don't gamble. Be safe. Don't risk. Don't take risk. Everybody. I'm not saying everybody, but because we have earthquakes and people, all kinds of events, landslides, whatever. It's when people make misjudgments about how safe they are in their position. It's not that they don't get warned. It's almost always they get warned. It's just kind of a bad judgment. And unfortunately, it's one of those judgments that if you make a bad judgment, it might be your last judgment. So I only have 2 subscribers anyway. So if you're a subscriber and you're in Florida, please, for my benefit, be careful. Be careful and take care of yourself. And again, hopefully that will be the end of it. So anything else you want to discuss?
No, okay. We hit a lot tonight, man. Hurricanes, GTII, politics. Whew.
Anybody out there, appreciate everybody listening. If you have questions, comments, please feel free to leave them. Thanks again. We appreciate everybody. And
we do.
Again, for everybody out in Florida, take care to everybody out there, period. Take care of yourself. To everybody in Florida in particular, be safe, take care, and be prudent. And we will see you soon. So have a great night. Take care of yourself.